So this is the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting for Wednesday, October 11th. Calling the meeting to order. I'll read the agenda. I'll do a screen share of the agenda in a second here if I can do that and everything behaves for me. Can everybody see that? Okay. So just reading the agenda.
No,
We'll start as usual with liaison reports.
Dan, we see your
then getting to current items. We will discuss liaison assignments. I sent a proposal around yesterday. So one, I'll spend a little time talking about what liaisons do, just for the benefit of new members on the committee. And it's also our chance to do any trading of assignments if I assigned something that you don't want to do, or there's something that you did want to do that I missed or hadn't heard about. We'll do a brief preview of town meeting, and just again for new members on the committee, what's going to happen and how that goes. And then we'll get to kind of the heart of the meeting, which is talking about budget guidance and talking about COLA. This is really, again, this is a chance to have a substantive discussion about that. My expectation is we will not make any decisions. We will not make any decisions tonight, and we'll do that later at a later meeting, and then we'll approve minutes. And Jeremy, you had your hand up, so go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry, Dan, to interrupt. I'm not sure if others are seeing the screen with the agenda or not. I'm seeing something.
Now I must have problems with my speakers because I can't hear anything. So could you hear when I was reading the agenda?
Yes, we could hear the agenda, but I think you had something else other than the agenda on the screen.
Oh, interesting. Okay, let me try that again.
I now know how to debug my phone, so thank you.
All right. All right. Is that showing the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Oh, good.
Don't know what I was showing before. Could have been some top secret, personal thing, but who knows?
It's something on USB debugging.
Oh, because I was trying to debug my USB microphone. So all right, that was the deal. Okay. So I won't go through it again. Here's the list of items. We'll approve minutes at the end. And does anybody have any changes to propose to the agenda? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda as read.
So moved.
Second. Thanks. Okay, and let's just do a quick roll call here. Shelley.
Aye. Here.
Ben.
Aye.
Mike F.
Aye.
Natalie.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
Mike W., if you're here.
Yep. Aye.
Perfect. And I'm aye as well. So we're 7-0 to approve the agenda. Okay, very good. So just to start at the top, two things on minutes. One, hoping for a volunteer to take minutes tonight. And two, I thought maybe if everybody's agreeable to this, we could set up a rotation for minutes rather than me needing to kind of do this ask thing at the beginning of every meeting. So if that's okay with everybody, after somebody volunteers for tonight, who'll get credit for this tonight, and Mike Flanagan credit for last week, and I'll look back to see who did it the week before. So we'd kind of start after that. So I guess two questions. One, does that seem like a sensible way to go? Okay, it just seems easier than trying to every night every meeting figure out who's going to do it. Okay. I don't think we need to vote on that. Just sounds like everybody's on board with that. All right, that being said, then let me for the last time ask and see if somebody could cover this for tonight.
I'm happy to volunteer for tonight,
Okay.
Dan.
Great. Thank you, Paul. That's terrific. Okay. And then I will before our next meeting get a rotation set up. So, and obviously if I put you on a night where there's a problem, we'll just do trades and we'll work that out. Okay. So any liaison reports from anybody? Anything people have heard and want to report back to everybody? Okay, hearing none. Let me, I'm going to do another screen share and put liaison assignments up, and let's talk about that. And I apologize if this is all a little awkward. I'm, because of my difficulties, doing this in a different way than my Zoom setup. You'd think after teaching online on Zoom for during the pandemic that I'd be able to make this work, but don't know, giving me a hard time tonight. Okay, let's see. All right, let's see if I can get the correct document to share. Okay, should be looking at liaison assignments. Let me say just a little bit about liaisons and what I think would be great for liaisons to do during budget season. We're obviously pivoting to budget season. Town meeting, of course, Tuesday, so we're not quite through with that, but pivoting onto budget season. So the idea of liaisons is to have a first point of contact with each department and each budget maker. In some cases, there's not a lot to do. In other cases, there's more to do. To give you an example, on my first year on the committee, I was liaison to a small budget, a department with a small budget. And so I just reached out to the department head, had a friendly chat, heard a little bit about what they had in mind. This was as we were getting closer to budget presentations, what they had in mind to present. And, you know, we all kind of understand or will as we get further along in the year, sort of how advisory works and sort of what are people's concerns and issues. And having heard what this person had in mind, just had I had a couple little bit of feedback back to them with, hey, you know, here are 2 or 3 questions you're going to be asked by advisory. So just think about that and make sure you're ready to answer those questions. And that worked out great, because when that person presented at an advisory meeting and they indeed got asked the questions, not by me, but by others that I'd predicted, you know, they were ready to provide the information that people wanted. And I think it just made the whole process go more smoothly. Sometimes early on, a budget maker will want to kind of try an idea out with thinking about making these changes and might want some informal feedback on whether advisory would look at that favorably or not favorably. And this liaisons provide a channel for those kinds of conversations. So I think the ideal thing for liaisons to do would be to sometime in the next 6 weeks, let's see, so budgets due, it's next couple months. Budgets due December 15th, I think, to Deb Seifring and Jeremy Marset. You know, sometime between now and then, maybe in the next month or so, reach out to the department head or the budget maker for whom you are liaison, and just, you know, maybe a brief conversation. If you know the person, great. If you don't know the person, introduce yourself. They'll be very happy to meet someone on advisory. And just check in and see, hey, any big changes coming, anything that you're contemplating that's going to be different, any concerns, any issues. And they may have a couple things to try out on you, and how do you think advisory would respond? And for new members, that will be maybe a little challenging to know how to respond to that. With a little more experience, you will kind of have a sense of how people on advisory are thinking, and you'll be very well positioned to say, that's great, here are 2 things you should just anticipate and be ready for. So it's really kind of being a first point of contact so that budget makers have easy access to the committee outside of the formal part of presentations, and a chance for them to get a little bit of feedback on things that they're doing. Okay, so that's my pitch on liaison. So comments, questions about that before we talk about specific assignments? And if you can, use the raise hand function, because or just jump in, because I'm, again, doing this in a different way than usual, so I don't have as much screen space to see everybody.
Dan and Shelley, and you may be covering this when you go through the assignments, but will you tell us how this is handled when there are multiple people assigned to a department?
Oh, yeah, good question. So for some of the bigger departments, I've written down two names. For like school committee, we will, presuming that we can get schedules to work, we will as a group go meet with the chief financial administrator, the financial administrator at the schools, and we will do that as a group. For other ones, like say police and fire, my suggestion would be to just coordinate with the other person you're paired with and maybe agree either to set up a brief meeting with the budget maker or to agree that one of the two people will call the budget maker and sort of proceed and just stay in touch and coordinate. I've done the multiple people for particular departments for the ones that tend to be bigger and have more stuff going on, where maybe having 2 points of contact would be helpful. And again, with the schools, that's about 60% of the budget. That's a big project to dig into that. So having multiple people looking at things is very helpful. What else? Okay. So what do people think about my proposed assignments? Anything that anybody wants to can certainly now, if there's something you think, hey, I'd really like to do this other thing, or if you'd rather just shoot me an email in the next day or so saying, hey, I'd be interested in this other thing. We can then, I'm just going to scroll all the way down. We can then see about trying to organize some trades. I tried to either, if I heard from people about things that they were interested in or maybe less interested in, or, I was trying to, as best I could, think about what people would find interesting. I put this list together and tried to share the burden as best I could. Right, I'll scroll back up to the top. So I'll take this as people are generally happy. As I said, if there is something that you want to switch but feels awkward to bring it up in a meeting like this, just shoot me an email in the next day or so, and then we can see about organizing a trade. Anything else on liaisons that is on anybody's mind? Anything? Paul, Shelley, Penn, Mike, anything is not having done this before that you'd like to know that I didn't already mention?
I guess what you're gonna be looking for in terms of updates, like when in this meeting, when you're asking if there were any updated liaison reports. So in advance of the budget meeting, then it seems like most of the updates would be related to that. But I guess as we go through the year, we'll get a better sense of what is typical at different times of the year when the budget is not pending. Is that?
Yeah. So what the way you put it is exactly right. So, so if you and I say are the liaisons of the planning board, this would perhaps be more a warrant article in the spring than necessarily budget things. But if they're floating a warrant article and you and I hear about it early, that not that they're necessarily going to do it, but they're thinking about it, that might be useful information to share with the broader committee. And so that would be like an ideal liaison report thing. Or if, say, a fire department is thinking about some changes in staffing and there isn't some confidentiality issue that which might well have budget implications, and there isn't some confidentiality issue, which would mean until they make it official, it's not meant to be widely shared. That could be the sort of thing of, hey, the fire department's thinking about this, and if they did it, it might have some budget implications. And so kind of as a way of keeping everybody on the committee abreast of things happening in these different departments within town hall. And there'll be times, let me put it this way, there are times that that as a liaison, I heard things from department heads that they weren't prepared to have widely shared, and I tried to respect that. But there are plenty of times when there would be prospective information about the budget or a possible change or a particular capital item that suddenly seemed very important that maybe hadn't been on people's radar screen before, that would just be useful to share more broadly with the committee and anyone else who's listening in on an advisory meeting. It's kind of a preview of, here's a budget issue that's going to come up and that we will all need to think about and assess. Anything else on liaisons? Okay, so I will stop that. If I don't hear from anybody within the next couple of days, I'll assume that, you know, that list is solid. And again, for new members on the committee, if you have specific questions about how to handle a particular issue or approach a particular department, I'm happy to talk about that offline. All right, so brief preview of town meeting. So couple things to mention. I think there'll be, in the auditorium, there'll be seats reserved down front for advisory members. So don't have to sit there, but there'll be a spot for you if you want to be right down in front to get a front row seat on the action. Mike Winters and I will be up on the stage along with Mary Wolf, I think Jackie Morris, and Town's Council. And Mike and I will be the ones who will actually be making the motions that town meeting will be voting on, because those motions come from advisory, and they will exactly track what's in the advisory report, which went to the printer last week and should be arriving in people's mailboxes soon. It's posted on the town's website, but should be arriving in everybody's mailboxes soon. And Mike and I will make the motions. Mary will be running the meeting. And there shouldn't be, there's no formal role for anybody else on advisory besides for Mike and me. So you're there, get a front row seat, get a good view to hear any comments that get made and follow everything that's happening. But the only formal roles at this meeting will be for Mike and for me. I posted our advisory committee meeting to start at 6:45. Town meeting starts at 7. This is all in the auditorium in Lindquist Commons. I posted a 6:45 meeting for a couple reasons. We all need to be there, and we need to open a meeting because as all of us there together and the possibility of some conversation, we need to have an open meeting. So I posted that meeting. So the 6:45 time is so that we have just time to we'll just meet in the front of the auditorium and open up our meeting. And then after town meeting, we'll again meet in the front of the auditorium just for a minute to adjourn the meeting, just to keep it all official and proper. And I don't anticipate anything this Tuesday, but sometimes before a town meeting, there's a little bit of business that advisory needs to do or some issue that needs to be discussed. A classic example would be there's a number in the budget that either changed or there was an error in a number. And so advisory's approval of the budget was for a different number than what town meeting is really being asked to approve. And so advisory would do a quick revote just to keep everything official and proper. And there's no question that advisory approved and was submitting and recommending to town meeting action on a particular set of numbers. I don't anticipate anything like that for Tuesday, but I suppose it's possible something would pop up. So I wanted to ask everybody to be there at 6:45, just so we could kind of get ourselves organized and get things going. I mentioned this before, but I also posted a meeting for Thursday night. Don't think we're going to need it, but of course, if town meeting does run late and needs to continue, Thursday night would be the continuation. So there's a advisory meeting posted for then as well, but I don't think we're going to need that. And then just while talking about schedules, then we all get a little bit of a break. I think with the town meeting and everything, everybody's gonna just be ready for a break. So our next meeting is actually November 1st. So we get a break unless something unexpected happens. And that's the meeting at which we're gonna want to, I think, finalize as best we can our COLA decision, and our budget guidance. And by then there will be a full-blown draft of the guidance letter, which advisory will send to all department heads, specifying a recommended COLA and specifying a guidance for the non-salary part of budgets. And that draft will get circulated ahead of time, and we will try to see if we can converge in the words on that draft at our November 1 meeting. So that's kind of the big, that's the setup for town meeting the rest of November. Any questions or comments about that? Feeling like one of my classes where I'm doing all the talking and I'm supposed to be getting students to engage and participate. So, just want to just make.
You're doing a great job, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. I appreciate that. Just want to make sure if anybody did have anything they wanted to get in, questions, comments, that there's a break for that before I continue on to the next thing.
I guess I have a question, just having not been in this role before at a town vote. Is there a projected length of time for the meeting, the in-person? I mean, or is it just, it could go, like, do they call it at a certain point and then it extends to the Thursday? Is there usually a specific time at which it would be called if it's going to go over?
So there is not a specific time.
Okay,
I think it will be in Mary Wolf's hands as town moderator.
okay.
And I think, she's going to try to run a tight meeting because I think, strong desire to get it done in one night. And I think she would make a judgment of, if it gets to be late, but it seems like it's almost at the end, then let's just push through. If it gets to be late and it seems like, boy, there's still 15 people who want to speak, then maybe she would decide that, well, we just need to continue it to Thursday. So I think it's going to be a judgment call for her on Tuesday.
She does not want to continue it. She does lots of things not to continue it.
Yes. She's going to do some consent agenda. Yeah, to get through some of the early things really quickly. My best guess is, we'll talk about Articles 4 and 5 for quite a while, but we'll get it all done Tuesday night. And,
Eventually, when people get up and start repeating themselves, somebody will usually get up and call the vote.
yes.
The audience members will get up and say, okay, time to vote. And once they do that, we can vote and move on.
Yep. Yeah, Natalie's exactly right. And the logic of that is, after a certain amount of time, people will have pretty much made all the points to be made. And then, as Natalie said, people start repeating. And at that point, somebody's going to say, this is enough. We've heard all this, we've heard everything. Let's just vote and see where things come down. Anything else? Okay. The one other thing I meant to mention about liaison assignments, just to jump back for a second. So Paul and Mike W, for school things, they've put out a tentative schedule of school committee meetings, both for Sherborn and also for the region. And they have specified on that list when they're presenting their budgets, and they do an initial presentation and then a kind of penultimate presentation. So I will send those dates around to you, because if possible, those are really good school committee meetings to go to, so that we all kind of gain some insight into what they're thinking about on school budget stuff. And I pulled those down yesterday, and I'll send those around. Okay, so then pivoting to really pivoting to budget season in full. So the two topics for tonight are to talk a bit about budget guidance and to talk a bit about COLA. So this is very different than what we did getting ready for the special town meeting. So on budget guidance, our role as advisory is really to be the kind of taxpayers advocates, the folks that the taxpayers ask to keep track of and assess the budget, and then in that spirit make recommendations to town meeting, and that we're the ones who are really going to dig in some detail. And as Wasim said last week, there are competing objectives, including, ensuring that the town's providing the services that people in Sherborn want, but also trying to be mindful of the tax rate and the tax burden on people in town. So our budget guidance, big picture, comes in two parts. As I mentioned, there's a recommendation for cost of living increase. So that is for employees, town employees who are not governed by a collective bargaining agreement. So, the police, DPW, teachers, they're all covered by collective bargaining agreements. So it is the salary increase for everyone else. So that's one important part of our guidance. The other part is what actually gets called budget guidance, maybe little lowercase b, lowercase g, which is what is advisory's guidance to budget makers for how much budget should increase for the non-salary piece of the budget in fiscal year 25. And Natalie can say a little bit about this. Mike can as well, having seen this before. But for many years, the position taken by advisory was to ask for flat budgets or zero growth. This is again in the non-salary part, with the idea wanting to contain budget increases. Of course, salaries will bring the budget up, benefit costs for health insurance and so on will bring the budget up. But for the other piece, to ask budget makers, if there are new things you want to do, think about finding efficiencies to finance those, or think about if there are things that you're currently doing that perhaps you don't need to do. And the idea being to, as a starting point, let's have a pretty controlled budget. Of course, there will be departments and items for which that's just not possible. So last year, with energy prices shooting up, as I mentioned before, if you want to plow streets, you want to plow snow, need gasoline to run snow plows, that's going to cost a lot more. And the idea is that budget makers can't make things fit within that flat guidance, that then they should come to advisory and explain what are the specifics that make that not possible. So I put that out there. Natalie, Mike W., maybe you want to say a little bit about, past years and how that went, and sort of maybe explain a little further what I was touching at with how this has been done in the past. And then we should throw this open to see if that's something that everybody's generally comfortable with, or if people want to go in a different direction. Natalie, Mike W., you want to jump in and offer any comments on that?
Well, it's worked pretty well in the past, except, like you said, the committees come with, very legitimate cost increases, like the cost of gas, the cost of plowing, things like that you can't argue with them, that it is. And we've spent some money in the past to try to consolidate computer systems and software systems that are supposed to result in savings, that hopefully, I think this might be the year that they finally got it all together, and it might actually help us a little bit. But, we have On-Site Insight, is that the name of the report, with all the town facilities, and they have a consultant did it. They have a schedule of repairs and maintenance that needs to be done. You can't really argue with that either. So, but we all are pushing against Proposition 2.5, that you get to the point where you just can't raise taxes anymore. It's illegal. And then we have a tax rate that you can't go above it. That's illegal. So I don't know. It's kind of a dance that we play.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. And on the Prop 2.5 stuff, with the high inflation and last year's increases in the budget and the year before that, we're getting closer to those limits. And again, the budget guidance is guidance, whatever we decide to do. Budget makers will come and say, well, to provide the services that the town needs and wants, here's what we need to do. And then as advisory, in terms of our recommendations, we make an assessment of whether that seems reasonable. As Natalie said, there are a lot of items that you can't really argue with. Mike W., do you want to add any perspective from last year?
Yeah, I mean, I would really just agree that I think because of the process that's in place and the existence of the advisory committee and the whole process that we go through and the questions that are asked, I think that the budgets that I saw submitted last year were pretty solid. They're not out of whack, and we have to rein them in significantly. But I think the Q&A process that we go through really helps to keep that pattern in place. So not to say that here and there with certain budgets, a question isn't asked that makes them reevaluate something, but it's a pretty good process where a lot of it is us educating ourselves on what the department does, but I think that there is an aspect that helps them to rein in costs, but it might be probably more long term that effort versus an immediate, but I think both exist.
Thanks. And thanks, Natalie. And sometimes, department heads will have interesting and maybe creative things they want to do, or they want to maybe shift around, reduce personnel costs, but then do that by a bit more spending on the expense side. And again, we as advisory, would evaluate that and see if we think that makes sense. Penn, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I was just wondering, are we going to look at or give some thought to trying in any overall sense or department to try to trim budgets? Because right now we're sort of, if we ask them, if we say, okay, submit a flat budget, but then there are these things that they can't control that we say yes to, we're still pushing budgets forward. And I would think, and again, I'm speaking sort of off the cuff, but if we were to try to hold to flat budgets, period, that would maybe force them to look at what could actually be trimmed. Because I think there are, particularly when you get to the services that people want, need, or want and expect in Sherborn, I think I know there's absolutely some flex in that. I mean, one example would be the library, which is very more generous hours than it's had in the past. Is that a need driven? Is that have the citizens driven that, or is that just we have staff, so we're budget for staff, so we're doing that? So one thought might be to start with flat budgets and let them, if there are things that have to be dealt with increases, say, well, okay, but your budget we still want your budget to be flat.
Yeah, so I think that what you said, Penn, is very much part of the conversation. I think our process in January, I think Jeremy and Deb are going to get all the budgets mid-December, and I think they're going to do some work on those, and then end of December transmit them to us and to the select board. And then I think, Penn, what you said is it's all part of the conversation. The nice thing about, I think, getting that presentation is we will we'll have kind of right at the start, here's how everything adds up. So there's what gets called the budget model, which is a spreadsheet that has proposed spending in every department for salaries and for other expenses. What's happening with healthcare, contributions to OPEB, and everything else that the town typically does. I think Jeremy and Deb are going to put that together so that at the end of December, we're going to have that and can see, here's a proposed overall budget. Here's the budgets for each department. Here's given some best guesstimate about what might be happening to property values. Here's what that might imply for the tax rate. And I think that's going to be a great starting point for just the kind of conversation that you said, which is flat budgets. assuming if that's where we decide to go on budget guidance for the, you know, non-salary parts, flat budgets. And if a budget maker comes in and says, hey, we want to do these extra things, then the obvious question is, well, okay, if you want to do that, what might you be able to trim back in order to stay within guidance? And I think that's very much part of the sort of conversations that we'll be having in January and February. What else? Other thoughts on the flat guidance? Again, we don't really need to make a decision until, you know, our next meeting, November 1. The idea is this, our budget guidance letter, right? The full letter, I think I sent the one from last year around before, you know, that should go out in early November. So budget makers have it in hand in plenty of time to put budgets together. So you don't need to make a decision tonight, but I will be between now and then drafting something. So certainly would like to have a sense of, you know, if everybody is on board with continuing with flat guidance as we've done in the past.
I'm in agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting a general sense that people are on board with that, but just want to make sure if anyone wants to suggest going in a different direction that we talk about it. Okay. All right. Again, we'll revisit this on we'll revisit this at our next meeting, and I will put some words on paper and circulate it ahead of time, so we'll all have a chance to, you know, kind of assess language and get the words exactly right. Okay, so on to COLA. So unless anybody, one more chance on budget guidance, anybody has any last comment? Again, just to make sure we've covered everything. Okay, so on to COLA. So this is the recommendation that advisory makes for salary increases for, as I said, employees who aren't governed, whose salaries aren't governed by a collective bargaining agreement. You know, this is always a challenging determination or recommendation to make. Folks who would receive the COLA are working hard and I think are feeling the pain of higher inflation. At the same time, taxpayers who ultimately are paying the bills also have been feeling the pain of higher inflation. And there's kind of this need to do the balancing act between doing something that's fair and reasonable for rewarding the you know, very hard work and dedication of people in town hall with you know, what can the budget afford, what can the budget manage. Just in terms of process, the personnel board chaired by Vicki Rellis will be meeting in coming weeks, and they will make a recommendation to advisory. And then that's one piece of information that we can use as an input. And then we combine that with whatever other judgment and analysis we've done. And then we make a recommendation that is what will go to town meeting and will be built into the version of the budget model that goes to that backs up the budget numbers that go to town meeting. So I think we'll get a recommendation from personnel board certainly before our November 1 meeting. My guess is that will pop up in the next couple of weeks. And then I put some information together that I sent around as just kind of background and backdrop. Before, I'll share that in a minute, but let me just mention a few other things. One, Deb Seifring did this very helpful analysis showing that each percentage point of COLA is about $27,000 on the budget. So if we went from, you know, a 3% COLA to a 4% COLA, that additional percentage point COLA would be about $27,000. Would also just, again, background on the town's personnel setup. Last year, the town added longevity pay, but there is currently not any sort of merit pay program. So the salary increases that employees that in town hall get are, you know, that's what they get. It's not, this is a base and then there's merit on top of it. This is really the number. So that's just a little bit of a background and context. Let me do a screen share and get this other document up. So can everybody see that? So I just pulled some numbers together on recent inflation trends, particularly for wages. Of course, you know, a consumer price index, that's the most common, most publicized measure of inflation. That peaked summer of 22, has been coming down since then. And the macroeconomic forecasters I track predict that that's going to continue to slow over the next year with inflation rates coming down further. I pulled together some specific numbers on wages. What these are numbers from data that the US government puts together on wages and salaries and on compensation. So it's a nationally representative sample put together by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they are tracking, the part that gets the most attention would be actually private sector workers, but they also have data on state and local workers. And so I pulled some recent numbers on wages and salaries. Apparently, looking at the top, I can't spell salary, but I'll learn how to spell that before next time. Pulled some numbers on increases in wages and salaries, not total compensation. Total compensation would add in benefits, but since our COLA is really about wage and salaries, I pulled numbers on wages and salaries. The first column of numbers are rates of increase for all civilian employees, so private sector and government sector. I pulled numbers for years ending in September, 12 months ending in September, so you can see from 2021 to 2022, that increase, and then we're seeing a decrease more recently. And the star on the 2023 number is the numbers for September won't be released until October 31, so I'll have them in time for our next meeting. So what I did is I just pulled what's the average rate of increase, putting it at an annual rate since September 2022. So it's not quite a full year, but I grossed it up to be a full year equivalent number. And then the next few rows are numbers for specific, for state and local employees. The second row, the state and local government employees, that's all employees at state and local governments across the US. See the same pattern of an increase and a decrease. And then I pulled off a couple of subcategories, management, professional, and related. And again, you see the increase in 2022, the decrease more recently. And I also pulled off the office and admin support because I thought those two categories most closely matched the types of things that most closely match what town employees would be doing. So it shows the pickup last year, decline this year, and then at the bottom I just pulled a few consumer price index numbers for context, and you can again see the September of 2022 overall CPI up more than 8%. But then more recently coming in at much lower rates of inflation. And they also have indexes for the Northeast, which are shown there. A little bit of background on COLAs. Last year, the recommended and approved COLA by town meeting was 4.5%. The year before that, it was 4%. And for many years prior to that, it was 2%. Going back a good number of years, back when inflation was pretty low and stable. The one other piece of information that I did not, and as I said, we'll get the numbers through September at the end of the month. Tomorrow, that's on the wages and salaries. Tomorrow, the September consumer price index number will come out, so we'll be able to update that part of the table. And an interesting thing about the consumer price index number coming out tomorrow is that number will help determine, actually will determine the cost of living adjustment for Social Security recipients who would get their cost of living increase in January. So that's will be based on the numbers that come out tomorrow. I did a quick look at sort of how that's shaping up, and that looks to be, it's going to be a number a little under 3.5%, I think. Depends on what the number is tomorrow. It could be surprise number, could be much bigger or much smaller than most economists are forecasting. But if tomorrow's number is anywhere close to what economists are forecasting, that will imply a Social Security COLA, 3.5% or a little bit less. So that's a little bit of context and background. I'm going to unshare this so I can see everybody. And I did send this around, so I think everybody should have a copy. And wanted to throw things open for any thoughts, reactions. If I met with silence, I'm happy to kind of toss out kind of what my sense of where these numbers pointed us, but thought first maybe just toss things open.
Hey, Dan, I have a question.
Yeah.
I thought in this discussion last week, Wasim's question around contracted employees have a defined COLA increase in their contracts, right? Anything above that is they get paid that as well. So, and that chart you sent of each 100 basis points was $27,000. I thought over some point it should accelerate, right? Whether if we were to do a 5% increase, it'd be more than 27. It'd be more than what's implied here.
Yeah, so one quick comment on that, and then maybe Deb can jump in. Just to be clear on who that amounts to, there are, and Deb can correct me if I don't say this exactly right, but there are employees on collective bargaining agreements. So that would be teachers, police, DPW. Their salary increases are set by those contracts. There is another very small, relatively small group of employees like the police chief, fire chief, town administrator who have specific contracts with the town. And my understanding, Deb, jump in a second here, but my understanding is that the point you're raising, Mike, that Wasim brought up before refers to those contract employees, not the larger number of employees whose salaries are governed by collective bargaining agreements. So it's not a lot of people. But Deb, do you want to jump in and fill in on that?
Yeah, Ben, you're absolutely right, Dan. It is really there's 4 people who have contracts that are different than that this would, that would be impacted. And the town administrator's contract is not based on COLA for the next 2 years. So that leaves 3 people. And actually 2, because the highway director, his is strictly COLA, same as everybody else. So that is included in the number you have. So the other 2 people are the police chief and the fire chief. And regardless of if you decide less than 2.5%, they still get the 2.5%. But if it's over 2.5%, they would get what everybody else would get. So if you decide on 4%, they would get the 4%. I didn't adjust the scale because it's really 1.5% on 2 people.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, makes sense.
And Mike, your comment just highlights what's a really important point, which is it is just those couple of people. It is not, the teachers, if we
Right.
had higher, if we offered a higher COLA, recommended a higher COLA than what's in their contract governs. Now, there has been conversation in the past and people debate this back and forth, but, does the COLA influence future contract negotiations? And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, probably depends on the context and the specific situation. But in terms of the direct linkages, Deb didn't build it in for the reason that she said. Penn, go ahead.
Thanks, Dan. I am unmuted. Okay.
You're good.
Thanks, Dan. So, I just wanted to make sure that I got first before I comment. So it looks like from the info that you put up that state and government employees got 2.5 in 21 and 4.4 in 2022 and are looking at 3.8 for 2023. Am I reading that?
Yeah, I mean, that is an average, and the 2023 right now is just September of last year through June, grossed up to a full year. So these are just, the government does a pretty extensive survey of local, state and local governments. What were salaries of all, everybody on your payroll, and, how much did they change since, 3 months prior? And, that survey is feeding into this. So this is, these are the salary increases that on average, state and local government employees got over those periods.
Okay, so then I was jumping to, if I understand, my notes are correct. So in 2021, while the average was 2.5, we gave 4.0. Is that correct?
Yes, but let's just be really careful about calendar years and fiscal years. So let's see,
Okay.
I should have been more. So these are on the table I sent around. These are based on calendar years.
Mhm.
So fiscal year 24, which started last July and is now in process. On July 1, 4.5% increase. On July 1 of 2022, 4% increase. And on prior July 1s, going back to 21, 2019, 18, 2% increase. And what we're talking about now is what the fiscal 25 increase would be. So what would the change in salaries be starting July 1, 2024?
Okay, I appreciate, thank you. But am I right in this, in looking at, even though there's a split in the months, we were still sort of ahead of the average for 22 and by some chunk and slightly ahead ahead of the average for 21, and then by a slight amount ahead of 22.
Yeah, if you sort of mush the years across, I mean, I'd say 4.4, 4.5 is basically the same given the precision of the survey they're doing, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm not, so I'm just wondering if we should, since we got ahead, you could argue that we got kind of ahead of things for 2021, maybe we should think about going, aiming on the low side for this next round of COLA.
Okay. I think, yeah, I think, there's some prior years when probably they were a little bit behind. And, this is everything. There's no merit on top of this. But from the numbers here, and it sort of depends on, which category you want to look at. On the total state and local line, the second line in the table, what you said tracks, it's a little different. Actually, it's pretty much the same story on the other line, so never mind about that. Okay, thanks. So other thoughts?
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I fully understand this. So, am I understanding that the individuals for whom this impacts their salary fluctuates year over year based on the decisions that are made by the town as it relates to the COLA? They don't have a set, so they don't know, one year they can make less than they made the year before based on COLA, because they have no, because it's not as though that's their new adjusted salary. That's just the cost of living fluctuation year over year.
So the think of the cost of I always find this is the term that everybody uses, COLA, cost of living adjustment. So I've stuck with it. But
I'm
just
sorry if this is a stupid question. I just want to make sure I'm clear on how much this
is
impact. Yeah,
the
impacts here.
Oh, this is good. So just think of it as it is the salary increase.
Okay.
There's nothing magical about the cost of living adjustment terms.
Yep.
You know, if somebody was making I'll pick, you know, easy round numbers. If somebody was earning $100,000 last year, 4.5% COLA, their salary would then be 104,500.
Right.
And since COLAs have been positive, going way back with, you know, 2%, 2%, 2%, and then 4, and then 4.5, salaries have been rising. So I don't think I don't think in anybody's memory there's been a year where salaries went down, because these numbers that we're recommending are what size salary increase. So, you know, if it was 4.5 last year, if we were to recommend, say, something in line with the Social Security thing of 3.5%, then on July 1, salaries would go up 3.5%. So, you know, the increase 3.5% would be less than the 4.5 from the year before, but it would still be an increase, just not as big an increase.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think, I'm sorry. I'm just so it's increasing based on what the prior year's salary was after the adjustment, right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Once another way to put it, to kind of follow on your point, that, you know, if in fiscal year 23 salaries went up 4%, think of that as the base. That stays, you know, that stays forever. It's not like that goes away and then we do something new. That stays forever.
Okay.
And then this adjustment, this increases on top of current salaries. How much would salaries increase?
Okay. Okay.
Other thoughts?
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Dan, do we, or does anyone here know what the yearly increases are for next year for the unionized employees?
That's knowable. I should have pulled that. I didn't. Deb might have some information on that, but I think that's something we could easily get, you know, to have for our next meeting.
Yes. Yeah, I can get it. I don't know it off the top of my head, to be quite honest.
I don't either.
I could guess, but I don't want to make any mistakes. So I can shoot you an email tomorrow.
I'm in the same place, Deb, as I vaguely know some of the numbers, but not enough to really. Okay, Deb, that would be great. Thank you. That
Sure.
would be
Thank you. One other thought is, are we experiencing as a town difficulty filling any positions, or are we concerned about retention more than anyone is? You know, do we have kind of like real-time data or needs that we might want to factor into the decision?
Jeremy, do you want to say anything on that, or Diane? Either of you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. We do have several vacant positions that we've been advertising to fill. The retirement of our town planner is one position. So the town planner and / sustainability coordinator is a position we've been trying to fill without a whole lot of success and a whole lot of applicants. We're aware that some other communities are struggling to fill those positions as well. There's a conservation agent position. We have an interim conservation agent. We've been trying to fill that more permanently. So that is another vacancy that we're looking to fill. Actually, hopefully going to be partnering with the town of Medfield and maybe make the position attractive as a shared position, but more to come on that. And actually, that seems the most turnover we've seen recently seems to be in the library. where, we were fully staffed for a short amount of time, but have had some turnover as of late. I think over the past year, we've had 4 folks, come and go through at the library. So that's been a one area of need.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What else? Natalie, you just popped in. Anything you wanted? So we have some time to think about this. We'll get a recommendation from the personnel board. I'll obviously draft a letter with a blank for the number until we settle on that. I guess I don't have a firm view at this point because we're at the very beginning of kind of thinking this through. I think I'm from scanning down the numbers, and we'll see how they update when we get some additional data tomorrow and at the end of the month. I guess I'm a little attracted to the number of where it looks like the Social Security COLA is going to land. I think with the Social Security number, that kind of provides, I think, a solid rationale for a number like that. And also, I think it happens that where that number is going to land is sort of the mid-range of some of the numbers on this table. So that's sort of that's where I'm starting as I've been thinking about it. But as I said, that's not a well-established view. That's just kind of my initial thoughts. And again, we'll see where the personnel board comes down.
I mean, Dan, do you know when we'll have that number, the Social Security number?
That we'll be able to get tomorrow.
Okay, great.
So the so-called memo item on here, that can get updated tomorrow. And there's I won't go through the tedium of it. There's a complicated formula for how they exactly calculate the Social Security thing, but all the data will be there for that tomorrow. That will pop up in the news after tomorrow's number of here's what it implies for Social Security COLA. And the numbers at the top of the table on the wage and salaries we'll get at the very end of the month. And then we'll have the full year, through September, which would be the latest and most recent data that we could use for making this decision. But as I said, I think the Social Security COLA number will be something under 3.5% unless something unexpected happens. But we'll see where the numbers land.
Thanks, Dan. Although I'm a little shocked to hear an economist describe elaborate calculations with the word tedium. You're breaking my image of what economists love to do.
If anybody wants to get into it, happy to do a little seminar on that, but I think maybe we can just save that and just see what the number is tomorrow. Whatever it is, 3.5 plus minus, whatever. Anybody else either with thoughts on this or information that you would find helpful in making a decision? Just as, Mike W. had the very nice suggestion of let's see where the CBAs are. We'll have some additional data that will come in, but anything else that would be helpful to track down as everyone's thinking this through? Anybody else with kind of initial reactions, thoughts? I won't do too hard a stare because we do have some time to think about it. But the idea was to get this set up so that by next month, by our next meeting, people would, and again, as this information comes in, I can circulate it around everybody, but that everyone has kind of come to a view and we can figure out, where the consensus is and what the committee wants to do.
I can just say I kind of agree with the 3.5 as kind of a starting initial idea that it makes sense to me, with the flexibility of the new information that we get over the coming weeks.
And we'll see what the CBA stuff says and all the rest. That'll all be interesting. And we'll see what personnel board comes up with. The personnel board will you know, ideally, they would like to know what are other towns doing. And, you know, that's hard to do because every other town's in the same place we are, which is they're trying to figure it out. But they will do their best to gather whatever, from whatever sources they have, what they can. And to come back just briefly to the question about vacancies and so on, you know, in my mind, there's sort of two distinct issues. One is, you know, what's a sensible cost of living adjustment? And the other, you know, Jeremy highlighted some positions where it's been challenging to hire people, and maybe there's a conversation to be had about, you know, there are particular positions where salaries have gotten out of line. But that's a problem that's hard to fix with a cost of living adjustment. That's a problem that perhaps needs to be fixed in, you know, through some other mechanism and some other set of adjustments rather than cost of living adjustment.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think it probably factors more into retention than trying to fill a position, but
Yes. Yeah, no, that's right. Because I think obviously if employees feel like they're not being fairly compensated by the town, you know, that becomes a morale and a retention issue. Absolutely. In terms of total compensation package, it does appear, you know, I think we heard that, you know, health insurance premiums, you know, that the town will be facing, that the town will pay, are likely to go up quite a bit, which is a budget hit, of course. I think from employees' point of view, same health insurance as last year. So, you know, that doesn't feel like a boost in overall compensation, because you're getting the same thing as the year before, although from the town's perspective, it will get more expensive. Paul, comment?
Right. So one question I had, it's more about an overall COLA thing. For a department, let's say the library, where there are several employees that are essentially doing the similar job, right? Does COLA mean every person in that role will get that COLA adjustment? Or does it mean, so is there some flexibility where the department head can do more given an outstanding performer? No, it's kind of for everyone.
Yeah,
Got it.
there is no, the town does not do merit pay. You know, there's
Okay.
a whole interesting conversation to have around that as to, you know, whether the town should, and it's come up in the past, and we don't need to go through it all now, but you know, pros and cons that various people have cited. But this process, cost of living adjustment, every employee who is not, other than the couple that we talked about before on contract, every employee who is not part of a union, this would be their salary increase on July 1.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so I'm feeling like we've kind of gotten to the end of what we can do tonight. If anybody still wants to jump in, do that, but otherwise I think we should wrap this conversation up for tonight. And I hope that this kind of sets everybody up for absorbing some incoming data in coming weeks, and then on November 1, we'll try to get to it and see if we can either all agree, or if not, you know, where the majority view is of what would be the right thing to recommend. Okay, so drawing that to a close, our last order of business is to approve minutes. So let me pop those up on the screen. So these are minutes from our October 4th meeting. Okay, and let me, in the usual way, scroll through these. Thanks to Mike Flanagan for putting these together. I will scroll through these. Please just jump in if you see anything that we need to adjust. And I will attach to the minutes the relevant background documents. They're all on the town's website, but just to kind of memorialize them in the minutes, the latest version of the legislation that we were looking at and the other documents we were looking at, and so on, just I'll tack them onto the end, so they're part of the record of our meeting. Anybody have any changes to propose or edits, corrections? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as shown on the screen.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Excellent. Okay, so roll call. Paul,
Aye.
Shelley,
I,
Mike F.
Aye.
Natalie,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
Mike W.
Aye.
And I am I as well. So that gets us to 7-0 for minutes. Okay. Thanks on that. Unless anybody has a last thing for us, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All right, and quick roll call. Let's do this in back order. Mike W.
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
Natalie,
Aye.
Mike F.
Aye.
Shelley,
I.
Paul,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. 7-0, we're adjourned. So see everybody on Tuesday at 6:45 for what should be an exciting special town. Yeah, exactly.
At Lindquist Commons, right?
Yes, in the
Okay.
usual place at Lindquist Commons. Yep.
Okay. All right.
All right.
All right, good night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.